Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we're back on the Drone Age dev server and we're having a look at some not necessarily new additions, but kind of copy and pasted additions, I suppose. The M36B2 first came to the Japanese tech tree, I believe, last update, and I gotta say I had a really good time with spading it. It was super fun to play and generally just a really good time. And now, since it's been added to the Japanese tech tree and it's kind of had its fun in the sun, the M36B2 has now been farmed out to two other tech trees. The first one being, of course, the American one, the home of the M36, and then it's actually been farmed out to the French as well, surprisingly. So the French one is slightly different to the other two. The only difference is that it has a 30 cal or a 7.62 millimeter M1919A4 on the top here, where the other two do not have access to one. So probably won't change too much of the gameplay of it, but at least it is something slightly different to it. The 90mm M3 is standard across the board for all of them, and I thought they weren't going to add it to America because the B2 was obviously in American service and built by America, but it was one of those which was heavily exported. So I thought they wouldn't stick it in this tree because, you know, the whole overcrowding thing and obviously giving other nations unique stuff, but I'm guessing that changed at some point, or at least the belief of that changed. So where it is in the American tech tree, it sits itself between the M36 GMC and the T95. Since this is technically a better version than the M36, it makes sense. If you haven't played this, by the way, very fun vehicle. At 5.7, you have the M4A376W, you have the M4A276 as well, at a similar BR, and you also have some very good CAS options, plus the Hellcats, which also exist around these BRs. The other machine, the French one, unfortunately isn't as lucky when it comes to a lineup. The M36B2, in order to have a fully functioning 5.7, you have to up-tier the Jumbo to 5.7, which you should never really up-tier a heavy tank. You know, they rely on their armor for reasons. And then the ARL-44 you have to up-tier, which once again is not the best vehicle to do so. The SA-50 is not a bad bet though, and the EBR can do alright in an up-tier, and the FL-10 if you have that as well, the wonderful M4A1, both of those can work out pretty well for this French M36. It just kind of sucks that it's by itself in its own little way. So the M36B2, the major difference between it and the standard M36 that you know is the rounds that it can carry. The gun is basically the same as the 90mm M3, but the B2 gets access to the Heat FS shell, the 305, 264, 152mm penning one. Now this means that you can pretty much penetrate anything that you find when it comes to this tier. 5.7, even up to 6.7, you'll be able to frontally pen stuff like Tiger 2s and also even stuff like IS-2s, which are the heaviest things that you're going to face at those areas. The heat makes it so upper glacis are very thin compared to facing against stuff like AP. This does also have the M82 shot though. The M82 shot on the 90mm is very nice. 185, 142, 65. This will deal with the vast majority of enemies that you actually have to deal with, has good muzzle velocity, and also has very, very good post-pen damage, which is very important. Does get the stock T33 shell, and also a useless APCR shell, but the good thing about useless modifications is that it makes the useful modifications cheaper, so we can't always look down on them. Because it's a tank destroyer, it doesn't get artillery, it doesn't get access to scouting, doesn't get access to any of the unique mechanics that different vehicles have access to in the game, which is a bit sad. And also, even though it has the 90 on a 360-degree turret, the armor is not exactly the best on this machine. Only 38mm on the front. On the turrets, you're talking about 76 or 30 millimeters on the top. They have this like little added roof area. This doesn't stop you from being overpressured, but it does save you from aircraft. One of the big problems with the M36 and the M10 series in game, and even the Hellcat, is they have very juicy targets. to pretty much any plane that decides to eat them. The M36B2 is still a juicy target, but at least you have a little bit of protection compared to none, which is the standard for the other vehicles in the general tech tree. So it's a little bit better armored, but not really. But the main thing is that the gun is a lot more effective. It's got a decent reload on it as well, good gun depression, meaning that you can use a lot of areas to your advantage, good turret rotation, and also decent mobility for the 410 horsepower engine. So it's also got 5 crew, so if your turret gets popped, then you still have 2 crew, you can still push forward, which is kind of nice. 11 pieces of ammunition as well in the back, so that will help it out as well. So you're basically getting what is more like a medium tank at this BR because of the fact that it has access to the the turret and also the decent mobility. It just doesn't get access to stuff like the for example, the artillery, which would make it a lot nicer to use in general. I wish it got access to the artillery. I wish it got access to a bunch of other things that, standard vehicles get. But it doesn't mean that this thing, is a bad vehicle. It means that it's, it's hampered in a few ways because it doesn't get access to all the mechanics. But as a vehicle in general, I really, really enjoy the M36 series. I think the collection of the 90mm gun, which does a lot of post-pen damage, and also the decent reload, the fact that you have a good turret, and the fact that you're able to get the gun on target super quickly is very, very useful in this machine, and makes it one of those vehicles which is quite easy to use, at least for people who might not be, or maybe don't like a bunch of tank destroyers. Like, casemates in general are harder to use than vehicles with turrets. The tank destroyers with turrets usually don't have too much armor on them, and that means that it's a little bit harder to use them, or at least get used to them. But once you do, you're able to just keep marching forward, keep being very effective in these vehicles, and keep going. It is also nice to see this vehicle spread out across a few nations, since a bunch of different nations use this vehicle. It's the perfect vehicle to be able to fill tech tree holes and also kind of build lineups around, because it's not too good, but it's not bad either. So it's just a vehicle that can pretty much just get the job done and add to what is already a pretty nice area for whatever country it's in. Hopefully we see more of these, like the whole export vehicles in the game. We've seen a ton already, but I'm sure they'll add more in the future. And even the 50 cal can be deadly to some vehicles, so you better watch out from the M36B2. I wonder if we'll get the other M36 as well, since that still eludes us to this day. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Nicholas Richardson, Elove Goat, Pyman675, Winter Scientist, Merciless Reaper, Jerry Prevolt, Megadino King, Orange Tail, Teddy, John Ryman, Universe, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Moxie, B. Young, Uncle Bean, Sem Arslan, Derek R., Bareen, Lafouche, and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.